Okay. All
Take it
right,
away.
session 3. Okay, in the previous sessions, I talked about different issues around our gender identity and how they're influenced by culture, who we are as men and women, and that there's a great variation and variety and diversity around sexual behavior and how people see themselves as men and women. And this has been more open in our culture. The other thing that people are willing to talk about now is what makes for a good sexual relationship for them. What kind of conditions do you need for good sex? And you certainly have a right to be able to ask for this. And what kind of partner are you looking for? And again, that issue about whether it's long-term or hookups. If you're interested in only in hookups, that you need to be upfront with that, because sometimes people confuse that with the desire for because they're looking for long-term relationships. People need to be real clear about what kind of relationship are you looking for. However, even in hookups, you need to have certain conditions that are going to be met to make it a good sexual experience for you, and me too. I want to make sure I have good sexual experiences too. Okay, next slide. Things like, maybe for hookup, feeling intimate isn't one of them, but certainly a committed relationship, that would be important. Feeling capable, feeling like, yes, I can engage in a sexual act right now. And sometimes that gets really clouded because of the use of drugs like alcohol. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, and it will affect sexual performance for both men and women. It's also used as a tool in seduction, and it's also used as a tool in rape. And so you need to be real sure about what you're doing and how much you're consuming. And if you need to, I've had students tell me that the only way that they could have sex is if they're drunk. That tells me that they're not comfortable doing what they're doing. And so the feeling of being capable to actively engage in a sexual experience is very important to the overall experience. Feeling of trust, I think even in a hookup, you have to feel like you're in a safe place. Certainly being aroused, I feel some passion for this. There's something that happening. I'm getting turned on. This is important. Being alert to what's going on so that you can respond. You want to be able to give pleasure to your partner, as well as be able to receive pleasure. So in order to do that, you have to be aware of what's going on and what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and being able to communicate that. And then feeling positive about the situation. If you're being coerced or somehow pressured into a situation, then you're not going to feel positive about the situation. And it doesn't matter if it's a hookup or if it's a committed relationship. It's not good. It's not going to work for you. Especially if you're going to feel guilty after what's happened. Next slide, please. Intense erotic pleasure and sexual arousal usually means that you have to, your conditions have to be met. But there's also a focus on the sensation. And people who go for sexual therapy, there's a whole focusing therapy for people who have sexual issues. Being able to really feel the intensity of the arousal, being able to arouse yourself or tell your partner how to arouse your sexual tension become really important. For older people, there's some biological changes that happen that can interfere with that sexual arousal. And that's the next slide I want to talk about. There are normal biological changes that happen as we age. Where's the rest of the slide? Okay, there's biological changes. Oh, you went too far. Okay, biological changes that happen. Probably the biggest one for women is the lack of hormones means that our vaginal secretions are not there. Our vagina is dry. And that there are treatments for that. There's some vaginal creams that you can use right into your vagina, or even using a water-based lubricant. That's like KY jelly, not Vaseline. Those are things that can help with that dryness. For men, sometimes it's a performance issue. It takes longer to get aroused or maintain an erection, but now there's medication, and so people are much happier with dealing with some of these things. There's also the issue around availability of partners. You may have had, some of us, I don't know about you, but in my family, both my brothers married the women that they fell in love with in high school, and they were married for years until both their wives died. So it's like, like your whole life is with this one person, and now you're out there and you don't even know if you want to have another partner because you're afraid to, even because things have changed so much. Or there's not, if you're female, there's not as many men around anymore. There are fewer men that survive in our culture. They don't live as long as women do. So or people have health issues that keep them from even thinking about being involved with people sexually. So the availability of partners is really interesting. And sometimes you'll see some people looking for younger partners because they have more vigor. They have fewer physical problems. And so if you're still a very active and physical senior, you might be looking for someone who's younger who can keep up with you. There's also psychological influences, like how healthy you are, if you've had issues about depression, if you're in recovery. Some of these things just make things very more complicated in your life. And then there's cultural influences where Grammy is not supposed to do things like that. And so we have to deal with family members who think that you're doing something outrageous because you have a sexual partner. Next one. There are stereotypes about ageism. I've mentioned them a couple of times, where people our age aren't supposed to be sexual. They're too old, and a lot of times we're invisible. I've been in meetings, professional meetings, at the end of my career where I would say something in a meeting and it would be ignored, and then someone else, a younger person, would say it 2 minutes later, and it would go, "Oh, that's a good idea." I don't know what to tell you. I just it just happens. It's ageism that happens in stores. People see it all the time. People just walk right by you and ignore you. You have to be really assertive as you age. And who defines sexuality in our culture? It's up to us to make our own definitions of who we want to be. The media has a big effect. Look at the rates of, look at some of the stereotypes that there are out there about the older women who are sexual. They call them cougars, and you'll see some of those quasi real life stories on housewives in the media or on TV, and it's like, oh geez, that's not what really is. Again, it's the media giving the wrong impression about what people are doing. We do know that the STD rates, the sexual transmitted infection rates, have been going up in seniors, which means that they're having more activity, unprotected activity. And so things like using protection like a condom, even though you don't have to worry about a pregnancy, you still have to worry about STDs. And so that's something to think about seriously. Next slide. The reality is that we can enjoy our sexuality regardless of our age and health issues and what your family says about being a single grandparent. It's up to us to determine what we're going to do with our lives and how we want to live our sexual life, and being assertive with our family about, this is my life. And I want companionship, and I want to be touched, and I want to have someone to do things with, and or I want to have sex once in a while and have a good time. And so if they don't like it, oh, too bad, is what I always say. Like it's our life, and they need to get over some of their stereotypes about what aging is about. Next slide. There was an AARP survey. They do these surveys pretty regularly. About a third of their respondents who listened, who are AARP members, talked about having sexual intercourse every week. And they kind of agree that there's, an emphasis on sex, and, that's only gotten even more so if you look at the videos today. I show a video of a current video of, it's a Lady Gaga video with a burning bed and all kinds of suggestive activity in it. And I point out that in my day, that video would be considered pornographic. Because of the content, because of the costume, and because of the dancing. And today, none of my students in the classroom thought it was pornographic at all. So there's a big difference between what we think and what the current the generation coming up is thinking about what sexual content should be. And so just be prepared for that. The couples talk about wanting sexual satisfaction. They are willing to talk about, this is what I need, this is what I want in our relationship, which is great. And they also said that they thought their health influenced their sexual satisfaction, and that would be true. If you're not in good health, or if you've got a lot of arthritis or orthopedic issues, it's going to be tough, a little bit more difficult, but it can be managed. Many of them have identified issues to increase their satisfaction, and there are certainly things that you can do, like using different positions, so that you're not having to keep a lot of weight on your knees, or on your elbows or shoulders, like having sex side to side. You don't have to have sexual intercourse. There are other ways of pleasuring each other, and some of it might be just lying together, spooning. And other times it involves much more touching and pleasuring each other. Next slide, please. For women issues, there's a big change in fertility. When I see little toddlers running around, there's several in my neighborhood, and they're just lovely, but they are so active, and they need so much attention. And I realize that there's a reason why 50-year-olds are not having babies. They're not fertile anymore. It's because we're too old to chase toddlers. Do you really want to have a teenager when you're 70? These are things that we all kind of agree with. Our fertility is a lack of fertility as we age is a good thing. But again, that the estrogen dryness, it's not only just your vagina, it's also your eyes, it's other places, your skin, affects your skin, it affects your hair, everything. Your hair starts to thin out. There's a lot of things associated with the loss of estrogen. And then there's cultural issues for women. Women in our culture don't do that. Church-going women don't do that. We're good Catholics, or we're good Baptists, or whatever. We just don't do things like that. Of course you do. People have that's a whole part of our life. We're sexual beings, and that doesn't go away. And it shouldn't have to go away any more than our desire for food. Many of the things that inform us about sex, taste, smell, touch, visual, and pleasure centers in our brain are also what informs us about sex. And so these are things that are very much a part of our lives, and they shouldn't have to be put aside or forgotten. Even if you're reminiscing about a life with a partner that you had that you don't have anymore, there was a time when we had a really wonderful relationship. And so what do you think of some of the stereotypes about older women that might be holding you back from being able to do what you would like to do in terms of relationship with a friend? Tuna, next slide, please. Okay, men's issues. That's good old Fred. Fred was very active, like he was big on, not only was he physically in great shape as he aged, even though he had, danced his, his knees off. He was a horseman. He had racehorses, and he ended up marrying a jockey, much younger than himself. So he was pretty active, and it stayed active to almost 90 years old. So, and I just love Fred. The things that happen with men is they have problems with climaxing. They're not able to actually, come. And it becomes more of an issue for them. But those are things you don't have to. So you could just be, this is enough. They used to be really reluctant to talk about their erection problems, not being able to maintain an erection. But since the new medication, that has kind of opened it up, and so like Viagra, people are able to use that medication. It's not good for people with heart conditions, but it works. It helps. There aren't any real medications for women. Viagra is not for women, really. It's for men. Sometimes men are slower and have a slower sexual response. It may take more to arouse a woman as well. But slow and easy is fine. And sometimes that's enough. And it's not about, your ability to give and receive pleasure. It's just that some of these things are just physically, they change, our body's different, and they're, you may just have to try some new things in some new positions, or maybe try the medication, like Viagra, to see if it works for you, if you can. There are other things that interfere with sexual pleasure, things like medication. The blood pressure pills, diabetes, all of these things can interfere with being able to be sexually responsive. But you can still give pleasure and receive pleasure in different ways. It doesn't always have to be penis in the vagina or penis in some other place, in order to have pleasure. Next slide. So this is some differences that were reported pre and post for women. Sexual activity is important both pre and post menopausal. Women, when they age and they lose their hormones, testosterone is the hormone that drives libido, and it's both men and women have it, and we tend to start to lose. If we lose our libido, it usually means in women that there's a decrease in testosterone. The issue about men having decreased testosterone has really been overblown in the media. It's not something that really needs to be treated, and you don't want to treat it because it's not good for your heart. But it does, sometimes it does affect desire, especially in women. And about 20% report sex may be painful. And again, it's because of that dryness in the vagina because of loss of estrogen. And there's not much difference in ethnic groups, ethnic and racial groups about this. There's, older couples are saying pretty much the same thing, that there's less interest in sex, that sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's still important to their lives. And that is sex in the city, or the countryside, for now. And our next session is about what do couples need to do in order to have good relationships. If you're in a long-term relationship, what's it going to take? If it's short-term and it's a hookup, doesn't matter if you never see that person again. It's all okay. But when you want to be in a relationship and you want things to work, or you want things to continue, what's it going to take? What kind of things can couples do to keep the relationship going, to keep the good sex going? And so this is the end of session 3, and session 4 is coming up.